Cleveland, Ohio, 1935. The Great Depression had sunk its claws deep into the city. Jobs were scarce. Men wandered the streets with hollowed eyes, and entire families huddled in makeshift shantytowns along the rail lines, scraping together whatever existence they could. But something darker than poverty lurked in the shadows of Kingsbury Run. A nameless predator who left only mutilated bodies and unanswered questions in his wake. It began on September 23, 1935, when two boys playing in the tall weeds along the run made a gruesome discovery. At first, they thought it was a mannequin, a pale, featureless figure lying in the dirt. But as they stepped closer, the truth settled in their stomachs like ice. It wasn't a mannequin. It was a man's headless body, neatly severed at the neck. The flesh had been washed clean with some kind of chemical, leaving the skin eerily smooth. There was no blood, none, as if the murder had happened elsewhere, in some unknown lair, before the body was transported here. Police arrived swiftly, led by Detective Peter Merillo, a hard-nosed investigator with a reputation for breaking cases wide open. But this was something different. Less than a day later, detectives found a missing head buried nearby. But even with it, the victim remained unidentified. No fingerprints, no leads, just a cleanly severed body and a growing sense of dread. And before the city could catch its breath, the killer struck again. By January 1936, another body surfaced. This time, it was found near Jackass Hill, just south of Kingsbury Run. Again, a male victim. Again decapitated. Again with the flesh scrubbed clean. But there was something new. The body had been cut in half. The press went wild. The Cleveland torso murderer, they called him. A killer who left behind no clues, no witnesses, no pattern except his sickening precision. The medical examiner, Dr. C.C. Pierce, confirmed what detectives feared. The cuts were too precise to be random. Whoever did this knew anatomy. The blood was almost entirely drained, suggesting the bodies were killed elsewhere. The use of chemicals hinted at a calculated mind, someone who wanted to erase evidence. As more bodies surfaced, a terrifying trend emerged. The victims were forgotten ones, drifters, sex workers, and the homeless. People whose names wouldn't make the papers, whose disappearances would barely raise a whisper. The city of Cleveland was gripped with fear. Was it a deranged doctor, a rogue butcher, or something worse? A phantom killer who could slip in and out of the shadows without a trace? By 1936, the case had become too big to ignore. The city needed a hero, and they found one in Eliot Ness, the famed lawman who had taken down Al Capone. But Ness wasn't dealing with gangsters anymore. He was chasing a ghost. Ness ordered massive police raids on Kingsbury Run, sweeping through the shantytowns in the dead of night, interrogating anyone who looked suspicious. But the killer stayed one step ahead, leaving only bodies and questions in his wake. Then, in July 1936, the investigation took a horrifying turn. Detectives uncovered another body. Except this time, it wasn't the overgrown weeds of Kingsbury Run. It was dumped right in the heart of downtown Cleveland, brazenly left in full view of City Hall. It was as if the killer was taunting them, daring the police to catch him. Ness knew this was personal, and he wasn't about to let a murderer make him look like a fool. But he had no idea just how deep the darkness went. By 1938, after nearly a dozen confirmed victims, detectives had their first real suspect, Dr. Francis E. Sweeney, a former military doctor with expertise in amputation and dissection. Sweeney was erratic, known for violent outbursts and battling alcoholism. More damning, he had once been part of a medical unit specializing in battlefield amputations, the kind of precise, bloodless work seen in the torso murders. Ness took personal charge of questioning Sweeney. But before an arrest could be made, something bizarre happened. Sweeney committed himself to a mental institution before charges could ever be filed. Did he know the walls were closing in? Was he truly insane? Or was this a calculated move to avoid prosecution? The public never got an answer. And the murders? They didn't stop. Between 1938 and 1942, more headless bodies appeared, all bearing the same eerie trademarks. Some inside Cleveland, others miles away. Had they arrested the wrong man? Or was the torso murderer more than just one person? Then, just as mysteriously as it started, the killing ceased. To this day, no one has been officially charged with the Kingsbury Run murders. The Butcher of Cleveland remains a phantom, his identity swallowed by history. But there's one final, chilling note to this story. In 1950, a Cleveland resident reported receiving an anonymous letter. The writer claimed to be the torso murderer himself, alive, free, and laughing at the police who never caught him. It ended with just one line: "You failed, but I am still watching." The letter arrived in 1950, sent anonymously to a Cleveland resident. A taunt? A confession? Or just another twisted mind obsessed with the most baffling unsolved case in Ohio's history? Authorities dismissed it, at least publicly. But behind closed doors, whispers grew louder. Had they let the real Cleveland torso murder walk free? Had the nightmare truly ended in 1938, or had it only gone silent? Detective Peter Marilow, now retired, was the first to speak out. He had spent years chasing shadows, convinced that Dr. Francis E. Sweeney was their man. But this letter, it suggested something darker, something he and Eliot Ness had never considered, because there was one detail in the letter that had never been made public: the smell of burning flesh. It had been reported only once, by a vagrant who claimed he saw smoke rising from a secluded part of Kingsbury Run in 1936. He had stumbled upon what he described as a makeshift butcher's shop, a place where something was being incinerated. But by the time police arrived, the site had been reduced to nothing but ashes and bone fragments. At the time, it was written off as junk science, just another vagrant's drunken tale. But now, someone was writing about burned bodies, as if they had seen it with their own eyes, and the bodies weren't supposed to have been burned. Determined to prove whether the letter held any truth, an investigative journalist, Martin Calloway, reopened the case in 1951. Calloway had spent a decade chasing unsolved crimes, but none haunted him like the Kingsbury Run murders. His first stop? Charlie Hogan. Hogan had been one of the only living witnesses, a railroad worker who, back in 1936, had claimed he knew the killer. His exact words to the police? "I've seen him before. He's not done yet." But Hogan had disappeared shortly after making that statement. No one knew if he'd been silenced, or if he had vanished on his own, too scared to speak. Calloway tracked him down in a small, decaying boarding house on the outskirts of Cleveland. Hogan was older now, his hands trembling from years of drinking. But when Calloway pushed for answers, his words sent a chill down his spine. "They let the wrong man go," Hogan whispered. And they knew it. Calloway pressed for more. Who was the real killer? Was it Sweeney? Someone else? Hogan refused to say. But before Calloway could pry any further, the door slammed open. A man in a dark coat stood in the doorway, his face shadowed. "Leave it alone," he warned, "or you'll end up like the rest." Calloway barely caught a glimpse of the man's face before he vanished into the night. But by the time he turned back to Hogan, the old man had collapsed, clutching his chest. By morning, Charlie Hogan was dead. The official cause? A heart attack. But Calloway wasn't buying it. Terrified but undeterred, Calloway began combing through old police reports, forgotten case files, and unpublished testimonies. And that's when he found it. A second suspect, someone the police had questioned but never charged. His name was Walter Frierson. In 1937, Frierson had been a butcher's apprentice. He lived near Kingsbury Run, worked with knives daily, and had been fired after a violent altercation with his employer. His former landlord had once told police something chilling. Walter used to bring home packages, heavy ones, always wrapped in brown butcher's paper. He said it was food, but sometimes I'd see something dark leaking from the edges. Frierson vanished in 1942, just as the killing stopped. Had the Cleveland torso murder simply moved on, or had he been hiding in plain sight all along? With Frierson's name fresh in his mind, Calloway visited an abandoned slaughterhouse where he had once worked. It had long been gutted, its machinery rusted over, its floors layered with dust. But something was off. The floorboards near the back were loose, as if someone had pried them up and put them back. Calloway hesitated, heart pounding. before kneeling to pull them apart. What he found made his stomach lurch. Bones. Dozens of them. Some human, some animal, all intermingled in a mass grave of unspeakable horror. Had Frierson been killing all along? Had the police ignored the real killer while Eliot Ness paraded Dr. Sweeney as the prime suspect? And then, just as Calloway started taking photographs, a sound, footsteps. Someone else was there, watching him. Then the room plunged into darkness. When Calloway woke up, he was outside, lying in the dirt, his camera smashed beside him. His notes were gone, but pinned to his jacket was a single, yellowed scrap of paper. Written in fading ink, it contained just one line. Some things are better left buried. The scrap of yellowed paper crinkled between Martin Calloway's fingers as his pulse pounded in his ears. Some things are better left buried. It was a warning, or maybe a threat. Someone had been watching him. Someone who knew exactly what he had found beneath the slaughterhouse floor. The human bones. The evidence that had never made it into police reports. And now his notes were gone. His camera was destroyed. Whoever had done this wanted him to stop searching. But Calloway was more determined than ever. If the Cleveland torso murderer hadn't been Francis Sweeney, if the real killer had been hiding in the shadows all along, then it was time to drag him into the light. And then the phone rang. At first, Calloway thought it was just the ringing in his head from the attack. But when he blinked and reached for the receiver, a voice whispered on the other end, "I know what you're looking for." Calloway sat up, gripping the phone. "Who is this?" Silence. Then, "Meet me at 4th and Prospect. Midnight. Alone." The line went dead. The address sent a shiver down his spine. It was an abandoned alley not far from Kingsbury Run, where some of the earliest torso victims had been found decades ago. Was this a setup, or was this the break he had been waiting for? Either way, there was only one way to find out. The alley was deserted, save for the faint flicker of a busted street lamp. Calloway's breath curled in the cold air as he scanned the shadows. Then he saw him, a hunched figure, face obscured by a tattered hood. "You don't have much time," the man rasped. "They know you're looking." Calloway stepped closer. "Who are you?" The figure shifted, revealing a weathered, hollowed-out face. Eyes sunken, skin leathery with age. Then he whispered a name. Walter Frierson. Calloway's heart stopped. The butcher's apprentice. The man who had lived near Kingsbury Run when the murders happened. The man who vanished in 1942. "I never left," Frierson murmured. "They just stopped looking." His hand shook as he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something wrapped in an old, faded cloth. "I want you to know the truth," Frierson said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But first, you need to know what really happened to the bodies they never found." And then, as if he sensed someone listening, Frierson's eyes darted past Calloway's shoulder. "They're here." And in a blink, he was gone. With Frierson's name fresh in his mind, Calloway dug into old records. If Frierson had still been in Cleveland all these years, where had he been hiding? Then he found it, an old boarding house, long abandoned but still listed under a fake name that traced back to Frierson's mother. Calloway arrived at dawn, the house standing like a rotting corpse, windows boarded up, the porch sagging with time. The door was unlocked. Inside, the stench was overpowering, a mix of mildew, decay, and something worse. He stepped carefully through the dust-caked hallway, his fingers tracing the peeling wallpaper. The place felt frozen in time, as if no one had lived there in decades. Then he reached the basement door. It was ajar, as if someone had just been there, heart pounding. He descended into the darkness. The first thing he saw was a table lined with rusted tools, cleavers, bone saws, scalpels. Some so old they looked like artifacts from a butcher's shop frozen in time. And then, the walls. At first, they looked like just another part of the crumbling foundation. But as Calloway stepped closer, his stomach lurched. They weren't just walls. They were bricked-up compartments. And in between the cracks of mortar, bones, embedded in the walls, sealed away like a tomb. And at the center of the room, something worse. a pile of rotting newspapers from 1936, and beneath them, a single leather-bound journal. Calloway's hands shook as he flipped it open. The ink was faded, but the words were unmistakable. They are still watching. They will always be watching. But the work must continue. And scrawled at the bottom, Walter Frierson. Calloway's mind raced. If Frierson had been the killer, why had he come forward now? Why leave a confession hidden for decades? Unless someone else had forced him to do it. Was Frierson the true Butcher of Kingsbury Run? Or had he been a pawn in something even darker? And then, a noise, not from upstairs, from inside the walls. A slow, scraping sound, like nails dragging against stone. And then a voice, whispering his name. The whisper, his name, came from inside the walls. Calloway's breath hitched, his pulse hammering in his ears. He stumbled backward, knocking over a stack of rusted tools. The sound echoed through the basement like a scream. Silence. Then a slow, scraping noise. Something, or someone, was moving behind the bricks. And then, from the other side of the wall, came a faint tapping. Tap, tap, tap. Rhythmic, deliberate, as if whoever was inside knew he was listening. Calloway forced himself to move, scanning the basement for anything he could use to break through the wall. His eyes landed on a rusted crowbar. He grabbed it, heart pounding. With the first swing, the old bricks shuddered. The second hit sent dust billowing through the air. The third, the bricks crumbled inward. Calloway stepped forward, holding his breath, and that's when he saw it. A hidden crawl space. The air inside was thick with decay, a scent so putrid it clawed at his throat. Calloway lifted his flashlight, the beam cutting through the dust, and then his stomach twisted. Bodies, or what was left of them, a row of skeletal remains, their bones twisted and jammed between the wooden beams. Some were missing skulls. Others had deep, deliberate cuts, the same kind made by a skilled butcher. This wasn't just a hidden room. It was a burial site, a place where someone had kept trophies. And at the center of it all, something worse. A single chair, shackles bolted to the arms and legs, rusted metal, stained dark. This wasn't just a grave. It had been a killing floor. A shuffling noise made Calloway whip around. Walter Frierson was standing at the basement entrance, his frail body hunched in the doorway, his sunken eyes locked on the room like he had seen it before. "I told you," Frierson whispered, his voice barely audible. They never stopped watching. Calloway gritted his teeth. "What is this place? Why did you bring me here?" Frierson took a trembling step forward. "Because you need to understand," he murmured. Then his lips curled into something that was half a smirk, half a grimace. "I wasn't the first apprentice." Calloway's stomach dropped. "And I wasn't the last." The police arrived within the hour, swarming the house as they dug out bones, cataloged remains, and tore open the hidden room. News spread like wildfire. The Cleveland torso murders, unsolved for nearly a century, had taken a new, horrifying turn. Had the killings ever really stopped? And if Frierson wasn't the last apprentice, who had taken up the blade? Then something chilling surfaced. A fingerprint, found on the rusted shackles. And it belonged to someone still alive. The print was a match for John Elias Kearns, a 72-year-old man who had worked as a butcher for over 4 decades. His family history? His grandfather had been a butcher in Kingsbury Run. His father had worked at the same slaughterhouse where Frierson had been an apprentice. 3 generations, tied to the same trade, tied to the same killings. The FBI dug deeper. Kearns had lived in multiple states, always near railroad tracks, just like where the torso murders victims had been found. And in every city he had lived, there had been disappearances. He wasn't just a butcher. He was a ghost, a hunter, a man who had learned from the best, and kept the Butcher of Kingsbury Run alive. 3 nights later, they found him. Kearns was holed up in an abandoned slaughterhouse on the edge of town. A SWAT team moved in, Calloway watching from a distance. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a gunshot. Officers stormed the building. When they dragged Kearns out, his eyes were wild, unrepentant. "You think it ends with me?" he rasped, a twisted grin spreading across his face. Then he laughed, even as they forced him into the back of a police van. His voice echoed through the night. You have no idea what's coming. And then the sky opened up with rain. The storm had finally broken. Calloway barely heard the reporters swarming the crime scene. His mind was spinning. The case was solved, wasn't it? And yet, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was still wrong. Kearns had been too confident, too sure of himself. And then Calloway remembered the fingerprint had been found inside the shackles. But who had been in the chair? Who had been the last victim? Unless there was another apprentice, another butcher. And this time, they were still out there. The Butcher of Kingsbury Run was caught. Or at least, that's what everyone wanted to believe. John Elias Kearns, the third-generation butcher tied to decades of disappearances, sat in an interrogation room, his wrists shackled, his expression unreadable. Across from him, Calloway stared. The FBI had him. The evidence was damning. The fingerprints, the basement graveyard, the chilling family connection to the original Torso murders. And yet, Kearns wasn't afraid. He was amused. You think this is over? He murmured, leaning forward. His voice was almost a whisper. You don't kill a legend. You just make room for the next one. The media devoured the case. Headlines screamed. The final butcher? Torn from history. The last apprentice? A bloody legacy. Has the real killer been caught? Kearns never confessed. Not once. In court, he sat silent, smiling slightly as prosecutors recounted the horror. Decapitated victims, missing organs, cryptic butcher marks. The defense tried to create doubt. They argued that Kearns was just a butcher, a man whose fingerprints ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time. But when the jury saw the photos from the crawl space, the rusted chair, the bones wedged between the walls, their faces turned pale. The verdict came swift and brutal. Guilty. John Elias Kearns was sentenced to death. The world exhaled. The legend of the Torso murders was finally buried. On the morning of his execution, Kearns requested one final meal, a rare steak. He ate it slowly, savoring each bite. When they strapped him to the gurney, a journalist asked, "Any last words?" Kearns grinned. "You already know them." The switch was flipped, and just like that, the butcher was gone. Or so it seemed, because hours later, when police searched his prison cell for the final time, they found something chilling. A single butcher's knife, carved into the metal, in shaky handwriting, was a message. I was never alone. After Kearns' execution, the killing stopped, at least officially. But in the years that followed, strange reports began surfacing. 1962, a headless body found in a river outside Cincinnati. The coroner reported precise knife work, just like the Torso murders. 1978, a train conductor in Pittsburgh spotted a figure in a blood-stained apron watching from an abandoned rail yard. The man vanished before authorities arrived. 1999, police recovered an unmarked package in Cleveland. Inside, a human jawbone and a butcher's tag from the 1930s. 2023, a homeless man claimed he saw a shadowy figure dragging something through Kingsbury Run at midnight. When investigators searched the area, they found freshly dug earth but no body. Each time the police dismissed the rumors. Each time the public whispered the same thing. The butcher never dies. Urban legends and the darkness of history. Over the decades, the Torso murders became more than history. They became folklore. People swore Kingsbury Run was haunted. Some said they saw shadowy figures moving in the darkness, always watching. Others claimed they heard whispers late at night, the sound of blades scraping against bone. To this day, no one walks Kingsbury Run alone. And if you ever find yourself near the old rail yard, if you feel the hairs on your neck rise, don't turn around, because some say the last apprentice still walks among us, waiting, watching, sharpening his knives. History has a way of burying its monsters. We convince ourselves that evil has an ending, that the killers get caught, that the dead stay buried. But what if we're wrong? What if the past isn't really past? What if some shadows never fade? Because if the butcher's story has taught us anything, it's this. Legends never die. They only wait for the right time to return. The end, or is it? Thank you for joining us on this journey into the chilling tale of the Cleveland Torso Murders. If you found this story as captivating as we did, please consider liking this video to show your support. Your engagement helps us continue to bring you in-depth explorations of history's most enigmatic crimes. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you believe the true identity of the butcher was ever uncovered, or does the mystery persist to this day? Share your theories in the comments below. Your insights enrich our community and spark meaningful discussions. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. We delve into the darkest corners of history, uncovering stories that both haunt and fascinate. By subscribing, you'll be the first to know when we release new content.